Hey USA, it's just me, and as you know, I'm nobody, just an American, and this is Just an American Moment. This is the podcast where we ask the questions that the mainstream media won't ask, and we provide the answers and solutions that the political class either can't or won't. So, welcome today. This is a special edition of the podcast in celebration of Memorial Day. I hope, in fact, you're all having a good weekend and also reflecting on the heroes who made this country the great nation that it is. I know last evening I watched the Memorial Day presentation that's done every year, hosted by Gary Sinise and Joe Montana, who are two fantastic patriots. The stories that they tell are heart wrenching and at the same time wonderful and patriotic. And I'm glad that they do it every year, even remotely as they did this year. I'm going to do something different for this week's podcast because the fact is, I've been doing it for a number of weeks now, and I hold my book up during every podcast, but I rarely speak about the book. And I think it's probably good to kind of walk through it with you. I want you to know that I never wrote this book expecting to get rich. Trust me, when you self-publish, you don't get rich, and that was never my intent. My intent was to write a book that put down the feelings that I think most Americans have when it comes to the state of our country and our political class and some of the events that we see taking place, the things that cause us to scream at the TV when the mainstream media will not ask the questions that we want asked. And more importantly, when we have people who say they represent us refuse to answer any questions, or for that matter, provide solutions to the needs of this nation. So, with that in mind, I want to walk through my book, give you a little more insight, encourage you to buy the book. I'm not a celebrity. I'm never going to be on Fox. You're never going to see me promoting my book the way the people on the various networks can promote theirs. So this is the only vehicle I have for reaching out to you, and I hope you'll take a few moments and listen to what I have to say today. So the prologue of my book, I'm Nobody, Just an American, is called "My Country in Ruins?" ? It's really essentially why I wrote the book. I'm asking the question, is my country in ruins? Am I seeing events taking place in this country that concern me, that worry me, that maybe stray from the kind of foundations and patriotism that we've seen historically in this country? As I always emphasize in my prologue to this podcast, I wanted to ask the questions the mainstream media is not asking. And I also wanted to provide solutions. I believe the problems of America can be solved by the American people. I'm not sure they can be solved by the people who say they represent represent us. But what do I know, right? I'm nobody, just an American. So the first chapter of my book is entitled "Stranger in a Strange Land," and as you might be able to figure out, the entire chapter deals with the whole immigration issue. And it addresses all aspects of immigration, motivation behind immigration, and how things look in other countries. As I've said many times on this podcast, I've had the real benefit of living around the world and also traveling all over the world. And that's just been the benefit of the job that I've had. But I can tell you one thing that I've learned, that the U.S. has the most liberal and flexible immigration policy in the world, which also makes it the most abused immigration policy in the world. And we're seeing some of that on our southern border right now. But I get into the different aspects of immigration from the different regions of the world. I talk about the motivating factors behind it. I talk about how it's being mishandled. I talk about the immigrants who've been allowed to come in this country illegally, um, uh, which, by the way, is another issue. How we hear so many conflate immigration with legal immigration. Any patriotic American knows that legal immigration is a wonderful thing and a great thing for our country. Illegal immigration, not so much, not so much at all. Uh, I think one of the things that I do, which is noteworthy in the book, and something that really I think any other American could contribute to, is the solutions I provide. There are effective ways for ending the immigration problem in this country if somebody's only willing to try. The first chapter of my book, Stranger in a Strange Land, definitely touches on that. So, from immigration, I move into maybe one of the most topical issues there is today, and that's the whole issue of race and something I call the invisible person. Now, the invisible person is really kind of a tribute, if you will, in some respects, to Ralph Ellison's great book, The Invisible Man. The problem today is that all races, in some ways, are invisible. All races have been moved into groups and not identified as race. But the most important race, if you want to call it that, is the American race and the American people. And I go through the various racial groups in America and those that are alleged to be racial groups in America. I talk about blacks in America and how maybe the biggest lie ever perpetrated was the whole representation of the success of black people in America. Successes that I've never heard in a history class, but in point of fact, would have created a whole different perspective on being black in America. I talk about whites and I talk about people of various Asian ethnic backgrounds. I think the chapter is an insightful chapter. I'm sorry, folks, but I ask questions that other people won't ask because they're afraid of being politically incorrect. And these are not politically incorrect questions. They're honest, fair questions. And in fact, I think they elevate all races in America because, after all, we're all Americans. That's what this country is all about. The next chapter of the book, I think, in some respects, has an element of comedy to it, and yet is very, very serious. It's the chapter called Animal Farm. And anyone who's familiar with the Orwellian work of the same name is very familiar with the line, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. Well, this chapter of the book really talks about the political class. And indeed, there is a political class in this country. And there are some in the political class that they think they're not nobody, just an American. They think they're the somebodies of America. And they have their reasons, both power and money, for thinking that. But what does it do? It causes them to think that they're in charge, that they don't represent us, but we act on their behalf. And we are here to fulfill the purposes that they have or the agenda they have. And typically they do it at our expense. So this chapter is really detailed. It talks about a lot of things that I know and I've heard so many people, right and left, talk about as it relates to politicians and the political class. And I think most importantly, what I do is I offer some viable solutions for addressing this. And I think those solutions are things that other Americans are feeling too, but no one's put down on paper, again, because of the whole political correctness aspect. But I think those solutions are common sense, and I hope you read the book and read them. The fourth chapter in the book is called The Magic Christian. I'll leave it to you to go investigate the movie by the same name and see what you think once you've read the chapter. But really, it talks about spending in America. And I go into a lot of detail about how numbers are just thrown around these days. And most recently, we're hearing numbers like $6 trillion for a budget. $6 trillion for a budget. Our money. Our money in bills that are so filled with pork that it defies the imagination. Although these people in Washington can get pretty imaginative. But it is a very detailed chapter in terms of what they're doing wrong. Because let's face it, half of the people that we see in Congress have never had a real job, have never run a business, have never made a payroll, and yet they're asking us to invest our money. I don't think so. It's a great chapter, and it offers suggestions and viability in terms of how we can cut 20% or better from government spending and yet enhance and improve the quality of services to the American people. This is something they don't want to talk about in Washington. It's something you can learn from this chapter. The next chapter in my book is called Oh My God, or New Christ Cardiac Hero, a tribute to a very old Janis Ian song, which probably many of you are far too young to even remember. But look the words up. They're kind of interesting. What we do in this chapter is we talk about God, but we also differentiate between God and religion. You know, to me, one of the finest representations of God comes from the movie Roots, where Kunta Kinte's father holds his baby up to the sky, the nighttime sky, and says, "Behold, the only thing greater than yourself." Now, I don't know what your religions are, and I don't really care what your religions are. Um, but there is something greater in this world than ourselves. And God is what we choose to call it. And I'll say it. So there's my little bit of political correctness. But the fact of the matter is, God has become so misunderstood and once again, conflated with religion. And in some respects, they are very, very different. And so I ask a bunch of questions of why are people attacking God? And I hope to bring some common sense to God. And maybe the solutions I offer are something that even you atheists out there might accept, because we're all still Americans and we have different faiths and different beliefs. So I offer solutions that should allow us all to get along a lot better than we have historically. I get a kick out of my next chapter. My next chapter is called A Cure for Chicken Little. And if you haven't figured that out, it's the chapter about climate. It's a chapter where I truly ask questions I've never heard the mainstream media ask. And yet I'm sure every one of you who watches your daily weather reports and comes to realize that the weatherman can't even predict the weather for the next 24 hours, let alone for the next century or longer. I think it dispels the whole myth that we're all going to die in 12 years. They're not offensive questions that I ask in this chapter. In fact, I would say they're very pragmatic questions. They're common sense questions that I know all of you are asking. The sky is not falling. And I think if we put a group of Americans in a room together to discuss the whole climate issue, we'd find that, in point of fact, they have better solutions than the people who are telling us that we need to panic and absolutely wreak havoc not only on our economy, but on our entire existence. I think the solutions in this chapter are really good, and I think it's something you can all have a lot of fun with, but walk away with saying that planet's going to be okay, and so are we. Next chapter is pretty straightforward. It's about health and healthcare. And I address every issue from the pharmaceutical industry and the demonization of that industry, the healthcare uh, system in general in the United States, which is, I can tell you, the most exceptional healthcare system in the world. Um, the things that make it flawed are those out there who think they have all the answers, or that all healthcare is the same for all people. It's not. And we discuss that at depth in this chapter. We also talk about the impact of lawyers in the legal industry on our healthcare, the impact of the insurance companies on our healthcare. And once again, uh, we basically cut through the Gordian knot. We offer solutions that don't come just from me. These are common sense American solutions. American solutions that I know every one of you out there could address and answer. So it's a really good chapter. The next chapter is also pretty straightforward. It's about COVID-19. And as I've said in earlier podcasts, this chapter comes from the perspective of somebody who has lived and worked in China, in Hong Kong, throughout the Asia Pacific region. Uh, I was there, as I've said before, during SARS. I managed a company that had over 2,000 employees, and talk about how we dealt with it and about the things that are being done wrong right now and when we're done in preparation for SARS. And we also offer solutions. Again, common sense solutions, which, had we not politicized COVID, we might be in I don't want to say much more upbeat America, but certainly things would have been done a little bit different. But then politicians don't ask nobodies like me. I'm just an American. The next chapter is called Words That Will Take Your Freedom. And it's a kind of a glossary of sorts. Um, I look at the words that are being used in today's culture and how they've been redefined or jerked around or just created. I look at words like reimagined and existential threat, words like woke, uh, words that have been transitioned like revenue, what the meaning of illegal immigration is and immigration are. All of these are covered in uh, that chapter. They are not politically correct, but they are honest, common sense statements and questions, and hopefully reasonable answers. Something to consider. The epilogue of my book is my plug. I'm Nobody, Just an American, which is available on Amazon, is really about just us, we the people. It talks about Americans. It talks about our wants and our dreams and our concerns. It talks about what being nobody, just an American, truly means. And you'll find it's much more substantive than you might think. Um, so I really would like to ask you on this Memorial Day to get this book. There is a dedication that I put in the front of this book, or acknowledgement, and I'd like to read it to you. This book acknowledges the people of the United States of America who get up and go to work every day, raise their children, worship freely, resist tyranny, and respect our Constitution, and who, through their simple yet essential daily activities, work to make this an exceptional country, because we are an exceptional country. I want to thank you very much for listening today. Please consider buying the book. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's self-published, it's self-edited, and like I say, you're not going to see me bouncing around the network, so this is my only shot. Thank you very much, and have a great day.